Well, thank you all for coming today. I hope you're enjoying the Secure Remote Workforce Summit that Catapult's putting on. Today, we're going to talk to you about how your technical team can better engage with Microsoft. And this is really meant to be an introduction to the Microsoft 365 Patterns and Practices initiative that started by Microsoft, but is really powered and ran by many in the community, MVPs, and all around the globe community members that are submitting and contributing to make it what it is today. My name is David Warner. I am a big sports fan, as you may see behind me, in the kind of crossover things of the helmets, football helmets, and Microsoft technologies. So big hockey and football fan, but I love to collaborate with the community. So if you have any questions as this session ends and you'd like to collaborate more with me or with Hugo, don't hesitate to reach out. We're very inclusive in terms of collaborating with everyone in the community. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a member of the PNP team. You can see my contact information there for Twitter as well as my personal email. I am also a Catapult employee, so love to interact with our clients and prospective clients. With me today is Hugo Bernier. Hugo, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. My name is Hugo Bernier. I'm a former management consultant with McKinsey & Company. I have over 40 years of experience in IT and over 20 years of experience with SharePoint. So that's right. I started SharePoint when I was 8. I'm a Microsoft MVP and also I'm a member of the PNP team. And I like to call myself the world's laziest developer. So lazy, I didn't even finish spelling that word. And the reason for that is if I have a chance to find a better way to do something that requires less work, that's always what I'll look for. You can follow me on Twitter at BerniH, or you can send me recipes, cat memes, or anything like that at Hugo A. Bernier at live.ca. And I'm always happy to help.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thanks, Hugo. And he mentions recipes because he's actually a former chef. So if you need some recipes, he'll have those as well. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask. All right. Well, today's agenda for the session is we're going to begin talking about some technology challenges. Trying to keep up with the Microsoft community is no doubt a challenge these days. And there's some very specific reasons on why that is. Hugo's going to provide us a lot of concrete evidence that provides why and in which ways that is providing a challenge for us today. We're going to talk about some of the community support that is available to everyone here in the community. We're going to harness and focus on some of the PNP initiatives that are going to provide you assistance and tools and resources and opportunities to help keep up, to contribute, to consume, to enhance your team and provide them support if they may be struggling with keeping up. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to kind of see a glimpse of tools and features that are available to you for free, no less, by the way, as part of the PNP initiative. And then we're going to wrap it up with some call to actions. Why should you take advantage of the resources that are available within the Patterns and Practices community? So to begin, we're going to start talking about technology challenges. Hugo?
Thank you. So the first thing I hope that everyone here will identify is it's really hard to keep up with technology. Technology is constantly changing, especially in the Microsoft 365 world. It's constantly changing. Your customers' needs are changing, and your stakeholders' needs are changing because they're either they want to adapt to the changing environment around them, or because they're frankly becoming more and more sophisticated and they want to do things themselves, or they're better educated about things that you can offer to them. And so it becomes a challenge. So let's look at why this is a challenge, and hopefully the clicky thing will work. There you go. So if we look at over the last 4 years or so, if we look at the number of updates, according to Microsoft's update history on the Microsoft 365 apps on their documentation, these are the number of major updates or updates that were made to the Microsoft applications. So when we talk about the Microsoft applications here, I'm talking about the desktop applications like Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on that you install on your users' workstations. And you can see that in 2020, now this is a projected number because 2020 is not over.
Hugo, you might want to try turning your video off just to see if that there might be some bandwidth challenges here. Let's see, I think we may have hit a bandwidth concern. Shannon, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Give Hugo just one more minute to try to turn. Hugo, can you hear us? All right, well, I will step in and play the role of Hugo for this slide and until he's able to return. So we're talking about the frequency of updates here, and you can see that with 41 currently, that's a projected number because of COVID. Obviously, we're seeing increased velocity. Oh, you are. Okay,
and this
great.
concludes my.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
There
All
you
right.
go.
So I apologize for that. I must have been going under a bridge. All right. So if we look on the next slide, and here I apologize if we're dealing with technical difficulties here. Oops. David, do you mind going back one slide? Thank you. All right.
Okay, I think we're getting some latency. There we go.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So keeping up with even messages for your team is a full-time job. If you look at the Microsoft 365 Message Center, the messages in the Message Center in 2020 to date. So again, 2020 is not over. We're into the almost the 10th month. There's been 65 messages that are planned to change. So what that means is Microsoft is saying, we're about to make these changes and you should plan for this because it's going to have an impact. There's 138 messages that are about keeping you and your users informed. So this is Microsoft telling you, hey, you should probably start thinking about educating your users and educating your team members on how to support these things. And there's 2 prevent or fix messages this year alone that are saying you need to make these changes because this will break something major and you need to prevent this or you need to fix this. So if you consider that, we're on day, what is it today? Day 188 in our working days. That means that there has been more messages to deal with than days to deal with these messages. And so even if you took a full day to deal with each one of the messages that Microsoft is releasing, it's a full-time job. But wait, if you order now, it's also hard for developers to keep up to date. So this is a timeline of the major updates that have, or the updates that have been released by the SharePoint framework every year. The SharePoint framework started as this framework, this platform to allow you to build SharePoint applications, but it quickly evolved to become more. You can now build applications for Microsoft Teams. You can build applications, library components, and Office applications. And on average, there's been over 5 updates every year. And every one of these updates includes new functionality, but it could also add breaking changes that would cause your developers to have to make updates, right? They have to maintain your solutions. And because there's different versions over the last 4 years or so, there's also issues with compatibility among the versions, between the versions. So if you have a sample, or it's not a sample, if you get a solution that you built, you and your team built 2 years ago, and now they want to update it, they might have to make all major upgrades and updates to the solution before they can even fix it, or they have to go back and use a different version of Node and so on and so forth, just to be able to modify that web part. So obviously, it is challenging for everyone to stay up to date. And if you don't mind going on the next slide for me, David. And this is not a challenge that is unique to you and your organization. According to Forrester Research, in the United States alone, by 2024, there will be a deficit of 500,000 developers. And that's just developers. There's similar numbers for IT resources out there. So that's the challenge here, is everything is changing. We're getting more and more bombarded with updates. Our developers are constantly struggling to even stay up to date. And then on top of that, your users are becoming more and more sophisticated. They want to do more or they expect more from you, and we're running low on resources. Even if we had every single student coming out of school become a developer today, we still wouldn't be able to meet with the demand of those 500,000 developers that we'll need by 2024. So with that in mind, how do we solve the problem? How do we continue to deliver value to our users and our stakeholders while still delivering something that is secure, that is supportable, and that is maintainable? And I hope that today we'll be able to demonstrate that with the community, the patterns and practices team, we're going to be able to help you achieve these things. And we're still going to need the developers, but hopefully we can make the life on your developers a lot easier.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hugo. So we're going to move into the community support available section of the presentation. So this is where we're going to introduce to you the patterns and practices team. Now you can get there by going to https://ms/m365pnp. This is a landing page for the patterns and practices team. Now, the thing to remember is that it started out as a SharePoint patterns and practices, but the initiative and the team and the technology has grown so much that it's turned into the Microsoft 365. We see that technology has evolved into teams, into bots, into digital workplace and collaboration. And so, of course, our patterns and practices would adopt that as well. The team is not just made up of a couple of people. This team is 30 MVPs and or Microsoft employees that are some of the brightest and most innovative and inclusive and collaborative minds in the community. We all take care of different areas of the initiative in the community, but are all very interactive and inclusive. Now, while this is the team that is responsible for primarily managing the different projects, tools, and initiatives within the patterns and practices umbrella, it's really made up of over 1,300 worldwide contributors. And why is this important? Well, if you think about it, days past when we would be working on Prim and we'd all develop in silos in our own little organization or alone in our team of a few people, think of what we all built. Many times we all built the exact same thing. Maybe it was a skateboard. You've heard the minimum viable product model, and you've seen that skateboard go from a skateboard to a bike, to a car, to a rocket ship, right? And when we all work alone, we all work on a skateboard. We're typically working on something, and at the end of the day, we're all going to have different versions of a skateboard, but by and large, it's largely just a skateboard. But by way of having over 1,300 plus contributors collaborating together, working together, improving together, we are able to go in an accelerated fashion of innovation from that skateboard to a rocket ship much faster. And this occurs because everyone is working together. As opposed to kind of holding it to the chest, we realize that when we share with one another, that we get a lot more out of it. You have a bigger range of support now. You may have a small team in your organization, and they may be struggling to keep up, but this community provides greater breadth to you. And we're going to see some of those tools that are available to you, some of those ways that you can interface with everyone in the community. But we just wanted to impress upon that this is not just some small little private team or club, but it's really open to everyone worldwide, no matter where or what your organization does. Now, it's important also to identify that the Patterns and Practices initiative was awarded at Microsoft as the model for community engagement. I had mentioned it started out as a SharePoint initiative and grown from there. And now, because of its success, became that referential model for community engagement. Some of the statistics here help provide backing for that. Hugo, tell us a little bit about these statistics.
Yes, I think it's important to emphasize that this is absolutely a mature initiative. It's not an isolated group. It's me and 1,300 of my closest friends who have worked together to create various samples, over 500 samples for code, for SharePoint web parts, for extensions, for Teams applications, and the types of samples and numbers of samples keeps on growing. Those samples are available for you and your team to leverage right away. And to identify patterns that you can solve with this. It's used the Pnp components, and we'll talk about some of those components a bit later. But the components are used by over 47,000 tenants every month, And the number of GitHub visitors in the last 2 weeks alone was over 80,000 people. So over 80,000 people have used some of the resources that we've made available. And these numbers actually are constantly growing. I bet the number is actually bigger than that, but I think 80,000 is impressive enough. And if you look at the YouTube watch time minutes alone in the last 365 days, last year was over 2.8 million minutes. I think that with COVID and people having a lot more free time at home, these numbers are probably going to be, and we know from the stats that they're already exceeding that. And that's really impressive. And that is the point here. There are lots of organizations that are using these Pnp initiatives, and there's a lot of exposures to these initiatives. So if you're using some of the patterns and practices that we'll be demonstrating today, you're not alone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hugo. And it's important to know, while we don't have it documented here, because it is an ever-changing calculation or statistic, last we had checked for the patterns and practices tools that you can utilize, there has been over 6,000 requests per second. 6,000 requests of those tools and services per second in the day. So it's not a small, little, undependable, unreliable initiative, but as we've hopefully shown you so far, something that is significantly reliable, significantly dependable, and available to you at your fingertips. So what does it include? Well, what are some of the things that it includes within the initiatives? We're going to go ahead and dive into 4 of those topics here today. Hugo will start out with development projects and cover some of those details. Samples and tools he will cover. Collaboration and contribution opportunities. Where can you get involved? How can you take advantage of some of these tools? How can you give back? And then really, most importantly, no matter what we show you, no matter how valuable they are, if you don't know how to use them, then they're of worthless value to you. So we're going to cover, lastly, learning and education. So Hugo, take us into the development projects.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Thanks for the gratuitous animation as well. So there are lots of development-oriented projects here in the patterns and practices group. Again, these are resources that are available to everyone, that everyone can contribute to and benefit from, hopefully. But the first 2 that we should look at are the Pnp Spfx Yeoman generator and the Teams Yeoman generator. Now, Yeoman is this scaffolding tool that allows you to create, for lack of a better term, that allows you to create wizards to generate new applications and new projects. So the Microsoft team has put a Yeoman generator for SharePoint framework, and the Pnp team has actually taken that generator and has improved by adding new functionality. So anytime that your developers or your teams want to build new applications, they can use these generators, regardless of what platform they're using, whether they're using a Mac or Windows or Linux. They can use these generators, and the generators will actually ask some questions. So which framework do you want to use? Which testing framework? Which third-party libraries do you want to include? It does all that for you. And the great thing here is that it allows your team members to focus on really the value-added activity. Creating a project is boring. Adding the libraries is boring. You know, if it's super easy for you by just using the Yeoman generator to build a new project, and also to leverage the skills that your team members have. You know, if they're already familiar with Angular or React, and they want to take advantage of that, they can absolutely take advantage of that. Gone are the days in the past where, you know, everyone had to learn a whole new language and a whole new programming model for applications when they were building in SharePoint or Teams. Now you can leverage the skills that you have and take advantage of that. Then, speaking of taking advantage of skills, we have 2 libraries that are available. One is called the Pnp Js for JavaScript support, and one is a Pnp Core SDK or Software Development Kit. And what they do is, for example, the Pnp Js is kind of this thing that will abstract all the complexities of making calls to getting SharePoint content or getting content from the Microsoft Graph, and by making things super easy. And they actually take care of verifying for errors, making sure that you're making the right calls, that you're not allowing for injections and things like that. But it also adds additional functionality, including things like making authentication a lot easier, or one of my favorite, adding caching, which will help you optimize your applications and make them appear to be faster. And again, your developers, I'm sure you can have hardcore developers that can, they don't look at code, they look at zeros and ones directly, and they could probably make the API calls directly if they wanted to. But what we're trying to do here is to lower the barrier to building new applications and leverage these tools so that they can focus on doing the right thing. Right? I'm not going to bother creating my own caching algorithm when there's a caching algorithm that's available for me. So now I can do the stuff that will deliver value to my customers.
Absolutely. No reinventing the wheel there. So it's
That's right.
absolutely imperative to take advantage of.
And probably, and again, it's important to point out that we're not listing every single Pnp initiative in this presentation because we'd be here for a while. But the last two that we wanted to highlight on the development side of things are the SharePoint Framework Reusable Controls and the SharePoint Framework Reusable Property Pane Controls. So those are two sets of libraries that allows you to make it easy for your teams to create or to leverage built-in controls that we and the members of the community have built to do some things like, for example, charts and maps and calendars. But they also handle things again like exception handling and adapting to changing themes. So if you're moving your application from one environment to another, it will automatically adapt to the environment's colors and things like that, as well as making sure that some of these solutions are automatically adaptive and that will reflow based on whether your users are using the application on a mobile device or on a desktop device. Again, these are all things that I'm sure your developers could build from scratch. But the point here, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's leverage what the community have put together to accelerate your development. On the samples and tools side of things, there's a few other interesting things that you should be aware of. The first one, which is probably one of my favorite, is the SharePoint Lookbook. The SharePoint Lookbook is a series of really beautifully designed sites that Microsoft and the community have put together that really demonstrate the capabilities of what SharePoint can do. They all use out-of-the-box web parts and out-of-the-box functionality of SharePoint, but they're configured in a way that is really appealing. And in fact, you can either look at the lookbook and use the lookbook as an inspiration. I've seen a lot of my clients that will look at the lookbook and say, I want one of those. This would be awesome in my site. But you can also you can go to the lookbook and you can automatically deploy the sample sites, including the sample content, in your own environment and use that as a way to get started. And the Microsoft Lookbook has been really reactive and adaptive in the sense that, for example, when COVID first started, they quickly put together a crisis management site, which gave you some tools and tips and things like that. And it's absolutely been an invaluable tool for me with my clients because they'll always say, okay, well, we want to do an emergency response for COVID, but we don't really know what we should put in there. So go look at the lookbook and go look for inspiration. And a lot of great work has been done here. The next series of resources that are available to you are what we call the sample browsers. So there's Spfx web part samples, Spfx extension samples, and Teams application samples. So they're all sample code, and the sample code here can be as simple as illustrating a very basic concept, or it could be a full-on solution that you would swear has been written by Microsoft because it looks really good and it looks really professional. All the code is available for free for you and your team to take advantage of. And we found that it was really difficult to find these resources everywhere. So what we've done is we made it easy to go to this one sample browser or a sample browser for each type of sample and to find them by framework, by compatibility. I want this to work on my SharePoint 2016 or 2019 versus SharePoint Online. Or you can even find sample based on your favorite author. So if you If you like samples that David Warner has written, you can actually go find a sample by David and automatically download it and get started on it. The Sharepoint Starter Kit is probably, if the sample browser were a series of individual samples, the Sharepoint Starter Kit is a great example of how to combine all web parts, either out-of-the-box web parts or custom web parts, into a complete solution that you can deploy to create site instances or a whole environment. Now, these samples, the Sharepoint Starter Kit was absolutely designed as a starter kit. It's not a finishing kit. It's meant for you and your team to look at the capabilities that are built in and to customize it to suit your needs. But it's got built-in capabilities like the ability to deploy pages and content automatically for you for configuring web parts and things like that. We use that. I personally use that in my projects extensively when I do large-scale migrations and reorg of sites, where I'll use the starter kit as a way to get me started. And again, this is a great pattern for your team to look at. Even if you're not using any of the code that's in the starter kit, it's a great pattern for you to look at, how do I build these awesome solutions? There's also some tools available. Two of them are the command line interface for Microsoft 365, what we call the CLI, and the patterns and practices PowerShell commandlets. So depending on whether you want to use PowerShell or you want to use just a command line interface on the command line interface is available on Mac, Windows, or Linux. You can actually do a lot of the same functionality that's available in the screens on the web-based interface in Microsoft 365, but there's also additional functionality that you're not even you can't even find in Microsoft 365 on the configuration screens. So really cool functionality here. On top of that, the command line interface adds additional information. For example, it will look at a project that you have, and which is called the SharePoint Framework Doctor. It'll look at your project and look for issues with compatibility. If you have the wrong version of a SharePoint framework or node or libraries that are missing, it will look at that information and will let you know, and it will give you the actions that you need to take. For example, in this screenshot, it says, you have the wrong version of Node, you need to install Node.js version 10. There's also a command for you to upgrade your solutions. And speaking of upgrading, we have another solution called the Modernization Scanner. And the Modernization Scanner allows you to modernize or to scan, your existing content. Maybe this is content that you've had for a long time in an old version of SharePoint. You migrated it, imported it to SharePoint Online. But it has that old look and feel. It doesn't have that new modern page look, and it doesn't leverage the new modern capability. So the Modernization Scanner will absolutely look at your existing content, the content that's been migrated, and it will make recommendations and take the steps to help you modernize your content. And as you can see here, there's some options in terms of identifying things that are not supported out of the box, for example, or web parts or things like that. So it does a great work. And of course, this is one of those tools that I like to use when I do large scale migrations, because it allows me to look like a hero to the clients by not reinventing the wheel and just taking advantage of tools that are available to me.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Hugo, for covering the first two topics. The second two, we're going to go ahead and move into. All of these tools are fantastic to use, but we need to be able to find out how to collaborate on them. Perhaps we want to contribute back to make them better. So what opportunities are there available to us? As you can see, a variety of options are available to us. The first two are discussions and issues. Every one of these patterns and practices projects has an issue or discussion list associated to it. As you can see, there's a variety of ways in which we can tag our issues, our questions, our discussions. Help needed, help wanted. Perhaps there's an enhancement request. Perhaps there is an opportunity to actually help out. So there's ways to collaborate with everyone in the community. It's not like these little isolated silos, but every single one of the patterns and practices initiatives is open. There's abilities to create sample requests. So if you're looking for something to be created, hey, I'd like to see a sample that does this or does that, that'll help you understand and adopt that new feature or technology. And by making these requests, you're putting at your fingertips the whole harness of the community. So definitely take advantage of those. These are open source. Now that may be a little scary for some because it may feel like, well, there's no support. And while that's true, there is no official Microsoft support. You have the entire community supporting you in making these better and answering your questions. And that community is very active. There is an initiative called M365 Social that provides you, maybe you don't know who to follow in the community. It provides you a guide to who is the most inclusive, collaborative individuals and personalities in the community. Now, all of that is great. If we don't know how to use it, we're not going to use it. So how can we take advantage of these? We need to learn about them. Join the community calls. Every single week, there is a Patterns and Practices community call available on Thursdays, and the theme changes every other week. The Patterns and Practices team puts on a virtual conference multiple times a year to provide guidance on how to use these initiatives and other new technology in the industry. And we have a Sharing is Caring initiative. The Sharing is Caring is very powerful because these are live hands-on guidance sessions where you're able to come in and we will walk you through together how to accomplish the usage of some of these tools as well as the contributing back. It's about lowering that barrier of adoption for your team and giving them a greater reach and greater support. So take advantage of these opportunities. Lastly, what are the best call to actions for you? We've identified the top 5 list. The first is familiarizing yourself with the Pnp initiatives, taking advantage of and understanding what they are. The second is signing up for these community calls. I call them a crystal ball into the future of SharePoint. If you can't attend them, they are recorded so you can watch them later. I know I personally do a blog that has the screenshots for every call, but they are as valuable as gold, so take advantage of them. Adopt a new acquisition model. This means reuse as much as you can. Don't reinvent the wheel. Take advantage of what's already been created and available and supported by over 1,300 community members worldwide. If you're feeling like you don't know how to do some of those things, how to take advantage of them, attend the Sharing is Caring sessions where we're going to walk you through. And you don't have to be a developer. There's a lot of opportunity to provide guidance and gain guidance by way of writing articles and blogs. And these sessions will help provide you the access on how to do that. And lastly, we want you to give back. And this is really about improving the overall ecosystem of the Microsoft 365 landscape. You can do all of this by visiting aka.ms365pnp. We're a little out of time, so there's no time for a formal Q&A, but we are happy to stick around if you have any questions. We want to thank you. It's a lot to pack in 30 minutes, and we've definitely hopefully identified how and the ways in which you can interact with the Microsoft 365 community.